either metaphorically or actually, and saying, okay, we're going to defeat this sin together. You're upset, you're angry. I can identify with you because that's my sin, and let's talk about how to defeat this sin together. So we're not just the authority; we're also someone following Christ together. So it gives us the chance to say, yeah, this is the area that I'm growing in.
Yeah.
That's very good.
And I like that especially at our particular time. The reality is those with kids in the home are raising Gen Zers. So actually, I'm not sure when that will quit. Maybe those who are just having babies are going to be, I don't know what would be after Generation Z because the alphabet ends there. But regardless, they say Gen Zers are often, they have that kind of hypocrisy meter going crazy, and that openness with them, the openness that we're going to work through this together, and sharing our own faults and our own failures as we're helping them through anger is, I think, so vital in reaching young people and helping our discipleship to young people.
Yeah.
So, how can anger be both a foe and a friend in the discipleship of our children? Because I know that's something that you really emphasize in this study, which I think is helpful, because I think sometimes as Christians we can easily see, all kinds of anger are bad, despite the fact that the Bible doesn't encourage a kind of Buddhist mentality of getting rid of that kind of reaction.
Yeah, I think this is really important to understand both the foe and the friend. And I've got chapters in the Bible study here on both. The idea with foe is for us to really grasp, I think, the destructiveness of anger, and so to see it, the sin for which it really is. And it's so easy, I think, sometimes to excuse my anger. I know there's a category for righteous anger and feel like, oh, mine falls into that so many times. Well, that's not true. I mean, even the philosopher Aristotle, he talked about to be angry with the right person to the right degree at the right time for the right purpose in the right way. He said that's not within everybody's power. And I would say, well, that's not within anybody's power. And so when we see that Jesus actually in the Sermon on the Mount condemns, says being angry, wrongly angry is damnable. You're going to hell because you got angry. That's just like one manifestation of sin. Then we say, oh wow, I need to deal with this. I can't just be in a sin confess cycle. So I need to see this. Wow, this is a foe. I need to have zero tolerance in the sense of, as I work on myself, confess my sin to my spouse or children. But then, having said that, to me, one of the things that we're missing is to understand that anger is an emotion that can be given to us to motivate us to act. And that's where we can see in Ephesians 4:26 where God says, in your anger, do not sin. And I really like the definition of David Powelson, where he says, anger is an active stance you take to oppose something you assess as important and wrong. An active stance you take to oppose something you assess as important and wrong. And so that. Now we can understand how God's anger is a attribute of Him, and why, as parents, we get upset and we say, well, actually, no, my child should not have disobeyed me. My son should have done his homework. And so that is important and that is wrong. And I shouldn't just confess my sin. I need to deal with this. So to me, that's where understanding that dual nature of anger as both a foe and a friend. And honestly, to me, as we've in a tribe or in a influence to examine the heart, and I'm all for that, and I believe that. But I worry that sometimes we just stop with the faux part, and we say, "Oh, I shouldn't have gotten upset. I shouldn't," and that is true. And yet, we also need to say, "Okay, God's given me this little realm, this little family to rule over, and I need to see what something was wrong in that moment, or I should say, may have been wrong in that moment." And so If my son doesn't do his homework and I just say, oh, well, that's something that's wrong with me. And I need to say, okay, what are going to be the consequences, or what's going to be the motivation so that they'll do their homework, or my children will obey me. Does that make sense? You guys want to follow up on that at all?
I think it's a really helpful distinction to make, like you said, because there can be that heavy examination on the heart, looking at desires and motives, which often can go awry. But at the same time, that was something I found very helpful in the study, considering that those things can prompt us to take action, and then to go further to make a plan on how to deal with it. And I know one of the things you talk about, praying for wisdom, being kept from temptation, to actually see some of those things coming, to be able to address them before they get to the point of inciting anger. And it kind of took me to some places like Colossians 1, and I can't remember if you put these in the study or not, but in Colossians 1 and Philippians 1, where there's prayers for spiritual wisdom and understanding, being able to look at those and assess those, and just looking at it from that angle shaped the way that I was praying. And so I guess it's not a follow-up question, but just, I can say that is a good distinction to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I found in my life is that sometimes I was getting upset about the same thing, sort of the same action or deficiency, and I'm saying, okay, God has given me this. I'm assessing that this is important and wrong, and I'm the leader of my home. I'm to manage my home well. What sort of action are we going to put into place? Consequence, motivation, talking to the heart of the child, new family rule, whatever, putting up something that this is a prompt to act this way.
Yeah.
Okay, Chap. So let's talk. I mean, obviously we all recognize that anger can be a problem, can also be a prompt to change. But how does that change actually happen?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. One of the things I'm burdened for is I think so many Christians are caught up in the sin confess cycle. So how do we actually, how do we change? How do we put off anger, sinful anger, and put on patience? And I've got the whole chapter on that. Ephesians 4:20-24 talks about the idea that we are to put off the old self, to be renewed in the spirit of our minds, and to put on the new self. And so that's just a regular pattern that you see in Scripture, which is God will reveal an area that we need to change, and then the cycle is putting off, putting in, and putting on. So I need to put off, in this case, sinful anger. I need to put in my mind scriptures that will renew my mind, and then I need to put on the patient behavior. That gets into a little bit about how to change. But one of the things I've got in the workbook is an anger journal, which I got from CCEF and slightly modified. But it basically slows us down and says, go back, look at the last incident. So most of us, it's tempting to go from blow up to blow up to blow up. Go back. A journal helps you slow down and says, what was I desiring in the moment? What happened? What triggered it? How did I say? So sometimes that's helpful just to see in black and white and just really be embarrassed by. And then what was I desiring? Was it sinful? Was it a good desire? Were there rights that I felt like were being violated? And what were some of the consequences? And then knowing that God was ruling over those, what does God say about my reaction? So that would be the negative and the circle of folly. And then prayerfully thinking through, what's the circle of wisdom? What should have ruled my heart in that moment? How do I need to undo the harm? And then what plan should I make for my heart or situation, so this is not going to happen again? So it's really slowing things down, not going from blow up, but to really walk through and say, I actively want to change in the moment.
Yeah, that's good.
That's and you hit the nail on the head. So many are caught in, and I've certainly have been there, am there, and maybe in various ways about the sin, confess, but then the actual repenting and changing and turning. A lot of people are caught going, well, how do I do that? And I think this is very wise teaching that accords in not First Timothy, in Titus. Paul tells Titus to teach what accords with sound doctrine. Not just the sound doctrine he's assuming, but then what flows out of that. And I think this is a great example of that, what flows from the sound doctrine. That this is not complicated theology. This is everyday life.
But I do want to add, obviously Chap is mainly talking about the sin struggle of anger, but those resources in his study are really great helps for almost any sin battle. So, and I know even the anger journal, I've used a slightly different version of one, I think modified by another pastor friend from what he had got and put in his in the study. But I've used that kind of thing on pride for myself even, and it's really amazing how that forces you. Just even that simple practice can force you to actually get to the heart of your struggle and get to the roots in a sin struggle that's deep in your heart, rather than just dealing with the specific blow up. But then to get you get even more specific and practical to parenting, we listened to this, and with a study, it's this idea of kind of journaling it and following through is so great and helpful. But I know so many parents are probably listening to this where this might be the limit of what they can do while they're getting their kids' snack together, and they're about to blow up at their child for not wanting that snack that they worked hard at. So how do we practically battle against sinful anger in our parenting, especially when we don't have right now the time to really sit down and do that kind of process?
Well, I think you hit on the nail on the head there, because part of it is, if I'm convinced that this is a real foe to fight or a friend that I need to analyze, then I'm going to back up and analyze and say what is going on. So in the chapter on practical thinking, just taking some time to think about what are the parenting challenges I am facing, taking time to create the plan. So, for example, if you're saying, in that case, you've got a child who's complaining, and that causes you to get upset. Well, on one hand, I need to prep that at this point in my life, I've got a complaining child. Okay, that's where I'm at. That doesn't give me an excuse to blow up. And yet, at the same time, I'm growing in patience, praying for patience, preparing to be tempted. At the same time, I want to say, what consequence will we put in place so that we can train our children from complaining to thankfulness? So to me, I see it both. I'm going after my heart. And then if it's a good desire that I should have, which is to train my children in thankfulness, then I'm also going to think about how can I come up with a plan. And then that just gets into parenting 101. And too often, I think sometimes parents, and I did this too, my wife and did this at times, we use words when we should be using actions. And so we just, because we don't have a plan, our voice gets higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And then the kids, run away, and we say, "Oh, problem solved." Well, no, the problem wasn't solved, but for the moment it was, but it wasn't for the long term. So we need to say, what was I just facing? Oh, I've got complaining children. Actually, that's a pattern in our family. Okay, how can we work to train our kids this way?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was you or someone else that using anger in your parenting is not actually a strategy. Some view it that way, just the elevated voice and menacing face, but that's not actually a strategy that solves the issue. So, just as a follow-up question to that, any tips on people looking to make fitting consequences or motivations, that kind of thing, related to what it is you're trying to train the child in to then help prevent your own anger?
Yeah, so I'm working actually videotaping this right now. I've got a Parenting 101 course. I call it Parenting with Confidence. That we could talk on those things all the time.